Congratulations to the people of the United Kingdom. You have dealt a death blow against the authoritarian covert project for world government. They denied that they were even building an EU decades ago. Then they said that it was elected and wasn't dictatorial. Then they said they wouldn't restrict free speech, which they've done. The EU bureaucrats have exempted themselves from taxation. These people are classical criminals, politicians transferring the power from nation states to a multinational body where they and their families rule forever like royalty. And despite all the vote fraud, all the intimidation, all the threats by the EU, the people of the UK have said no. A huge blow against tyranny, a huge boon for liberty and freedom and sovereignty and populism worldwide. This is a great victory. Congratulations to the folks in the UK. We see nationalism rising here in the United States as well. Donald Trump has come out against world government, said this is a serious blow against globalism. Nigel Farage, Donald Trump, globally helping lead us against the New World Order. And you, the info warriors, spreading the word for all those years. You are the tip of the spear in this fight. You are the resistance. So congratulations to you. They can't have world government and keep it in the shadows, especially when it's authoritarian. And by forcing the debate, being called conspiracy theorists for being informed, we have now forced it into the mainstream, and we're winning the debate that we shouldn't have multinational corporations masquerading as government with diplomatic immunity above the law playing God. This is the beginning of the end of world government. It may take 5-10 years, but we have blown giant bloody holes in the globalist operation. That's why I've always said we're on the march. The globalist New World Order empire is on the run.
Absolutely, and this is a very important day. Very excited, very happy. There's a great deal to celebrate today. And of course, we see the markets in turmoil, but don't fear. Don't worry about that. This is just a bump in the road, folks. This is something that they're pulling on us. We're going to be talking to Steve Pieczenik. That's precisely what he's going to explain to you. We're also going to be talking to Roger Stone. We have another victory domestically, so we're going to talk to him about what's going on with that. But understand this in the context even of American elections. What we are involved in is a world war against globalism. Why should we believe these people who have failed to predict every catastrophe that has happened to us? They're now predicting, oh, this is going to be a catastrophe. I don't think so. We're going to get over it. It's not even a problem, and Donald Trump pointed it out. Many people... Donald Trump understands that when the currency goes down, as he pointed out the golf course in Scotland where he was, he says, hey, it'll make it cheaper for people to come here. There are advantages to that. How do you think China got rich? Why do you think Japan is trying to manipulate their currency down? If the globalists want to try to manipulate this currency down, this is probably just a bump in the road. But if they want to keep it down to try to scare the people in Britain and leave it down, I say bring it on. We're going to look at all the different results of this. Of course, David Cameron is having to resign. We see Nigel Farage, who has worked for many, many years as a voice crying in the wilderness, finally vindicated over all of this. And there's the forces at play. People who support Trump, as well as people who don't support Trump, are pointing to the fact that this is very portentous for what's going to happen in the United States. We have an article from Paul Joseph Watson making that very case. And we have news from every source, left and right. Here's the BBC saying 5 reasons Brexit could signal Trump winning the White House. Everyone is saying that. And look at Hillary and Obama. Look at how little effect they had. As a matter of fact, I think probably Obama helped Britons to get their freedom. Do you think people really like foreigners coming into your country and threatening you, telling you you're going to get at the back of the line? Yeah, that worked really good, Obama. And you keep bringing in those people from Mexico and from Europe to threaten us about how we should not have our own control over our own government. This truly is Independence Day. I really didn't think it would happen. I was absolutely amazed that this happened. I thought, well, okay, they're showing them ahead for a little bit. Now, they're bringing in Remain. Now they're going to rig this election. I couldn't believe it. Must have been a massive landslide where they couldn't rig this thing. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
The developments that we have witnessed in the last 24 hours in the UK referendum to leave the euro is one of the greatest political events, not just in modern history, but in world history. The globalists for more than 50 years have tried to build a planetary, unelected world government by stealth. The problem is, once you finally try to put it into play and create global taxes and global regulations, and once you start trying to arrest people that criticize the EU or criticize open borders, people then knew that what the, quote, conspiracy theorists, that is informed individuals, had been telling them for decades was true. Margaret Thatcher, famous prime minister in the 80s, had warned that the Euro project and the Bilderberg Group were a tyrannical organization attempting to transfer power from nation states to unelected boards. And the great victory is that despite the intimidation, despite all the election fraud, despite the media, the traitor media working to deceive the people, the vast majority of voters in the UK voted to leave the European Union. Now, this isn't just a referendum on global government. It's a referendum on mainstream media and the fact that their deception isn't working on the people anymore. And yes, they're going to strike back, and they're going to drive down stocks, and they're going to play all sorts of games and try to hold countries hostage. But it doesn't matter, because the euro was set up to destroy nation states and to consolidate power and control. The euro was set up to loot nations. The founders of it from the beginning admitted. It's even been in the BBC. Paul Watson's written articles about it, that it was set up to be piratical. Their excuse is they're destroying commerce and prosperity to, quote, save the earth. The truth is they are simply consolidating power and control for themselves to carry out autocratic dictatorial controls. And this also is a major referendum showing that modern populism is based in the true worldview and cosmology of anti-New World Order, anti-globalism. And despite the media for decades saying none of this existed, and that there was no plan, and that there was no plan to set up a carbon tax, and there was no plan to set up these global tribunals, and there was no plan to set up a one world religion, and the Federal Reserve was federal, it wasn't privately controlled. All of these hoaxes have fallen. And now we're beginning to have a real debate. And all the people that laughed at the conspiracy theorists, which just meant laughed at informed folks, now realize that they were chumps. They realized they were conned. They realized that they were manipulated. They realized that it really was true that the power structure would dare try to establish a corporate, secret world government. And once that genie is out of the bottle, it's all over. The globalists are in full panic, and it's happening all over the world. Here's a headline from CNN. They actually tell the truth at the first part of this article. It's very rare. UK referendum. And it goes on in the article to admit, in the single most momentous day in British politics since World War II, the impact of this result has been far and wide. The global markets hit, and UK Prime Minister David Cameron announcing his resignation after the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union. That's right, resigning. And Nigel Farage, who would come on our shows 10 years ago, the leader of the UKIP party that was just founded a few decades ago, that went from having a few percentage points in the polls a decade ago to now being the fastest growing party, not just in the UK, but in Europe. And he gets up every week in the UK Parliament or in the EU Parliament. UKIP members do that in the UK. He does it as a UKIP member in the EU Parliament, and points out that their rulings and their votes are ceremonial, and that almost all laws are made by the EU bureaucracies, and that it is actually a dictatorship that hands down power, like the Communist Politburo in China, to the successors, generally who are even family members. I mean, think about how crazy this is, and all these weird politicians from the former Eastern Bloc that were communist are now being recruited to run the whole show. They're actually reactivating the Stasi. This isn't just an unelected bureaucracy that hoaxed its way into power. It's also anti-freedom. It's anti-religious freedom. It's anti-free speech. It's globalist. It's trying to rush in as many foreigners as it can so that they can activate them anytime they need to and have them burn down major cities if the French or the Germans or the Swedes or the Dutch or the Greeks or the Italians don't submit. I mean, this is modern warfare that we're seeing. And the incredible news is, I can't even really describe personally the words of how massive this is, because this is the globalist system basically tearing itself apart. The people know that world government is not trying to deliver some socialist utopia, but it's delivering a eugenics nightmare. We have statements up on Infowars.com by Donald Trump talking about how nationalism is winning and populism is awakening, and how globalism and world government and unelected tyrannies are failing, and how this is a referendum in Europe on nationalism, and how this bodes well for him in the election here. Absolutely. And even if the globalists dare steal this election from Donald Trump, or God forbid, assassinate him, he'll just be a bigger martyr. He'll just be a bigger hero because he resisted, because he spoke up. And all I can say to the patriots around this world, from England to China to the United States, from Mexico to Canada, doesn't matter where you are, from Brazil to Chile, from Nigeria to South Africa, from Japan to India, from Russia it just doesn't matter. You are humans that have common sense and want basic sovereignty and want due process and want private property and want to have fair courts and want your children to have a future. And you know the world government project of Henry Kissinger, who, by the way, just endorsed Hillary Clinton, is designed to create a permanent ruling oligarchy overclass that dominates and controls humanity and basically establishes a scientific dictatorship known as a technocracy in their own words. They're so arrogant that 6 years ago, there was an article in the Financial Times of London, and it said, "And now for world government," by their foreign editor, who, by the way, has attended Bilderberg. And he arrogantly wrote in that article, you ought to read it, he wrote two different ones of the same name, because the first one was so incendiary, they tried to put a new one out a day later with the same headline to confuse folks, but you can go read both of them. And in the article, he says, and now for world government, he says, yes, we did this by stealth. Yes, it's authoritarian, and we have a right to rule you because we were smart enough to take over and do this. Well, it's not very hard when you're large central banks that control the manipulation of currency and credit to establish a plan to create international boards where you buy off politicians and then have them, by stealth or by treaty, sign over incremental authorities into that multinational body. Then you don't even have a vote in most cases, like the UK didn't enter the EU. And then over the process of decades, you finally transfer total power, exempt yourselves from taxes and regulations, give yourself diplomatic immunity, and create a new system of royalty. And its greatest power was that it was over the top. Its greatest power was that it was so ridiculous and so flagrant and so just over the top ridiculous that people couldn't believe that this was really being established and their countries were going to be ruled, never voting, by multinational corporations on secret boards that exempt themselves from taxes. No one could believe it, even though it was in all the documents, even though it was all admitted, even though it was all on record. People couldn't believe it, just like they couldn't believe the Federal Reserve wasn't federal. But once they finally are forced to see it's true, it doesn't matter how many articles they have calling us conspiracy theorists. Then the massive nature of the hoax that helped them get away with it becomes now a bomb or gasoline that burns them down that much quicker. Total hoaxes, total con games either totally succeed or totally fail and blow up and burn into ashes. And now we're seeing this giant rotten old barn doused in gasoline that is the world government project being lit on fire. And these globalists are going to strike back. They're going to hammer the economy. They're going to start wars. They're going to engage in all sorts of false flag behavior, you name it. But again, the genie's already out of the bottle. The trick is already exposed. People are conscious and are aware of what's happening, and we have so many battles ahead of us. But I'm telling you, this battle has helped us win the war. Just like once they turned Hitler back in Russia, and when Operation Barbarossa failed, and just like when we beat him at the Battle of the Bulge, we knew Hitler was going to continue to fight on. But he had lost the war. There was no way for him to turn the tide back the other way. And we have now passed the Rubicon, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a lot of problems to face. There's still corruption. World government will try to rear its head again and again, but we have slain the dragon with a death blow. It's climbed back into its cave and is bleeding to death right now. And I just want to salute every single one of you. This is a time to absolutely celebrate. This is something to put in your diary.